Welcome, everybody. It is Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, or whatever time it happens to be where you are because you are watching us right now, March 25th. And this is the time for Outwitting the Devil, our book series based on the book by Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil. And we are featuring a gentleman who has been with us for the last several weeks every Wednesday, helping us understand what this amazing book is all about. This gentleman has studied at University of Wyoming, Northwest College, and Stanford University, works at making a difference, teaching people how to create an entrepreneurial lifestyle of fun, profit, freedom, and impact. And his mission is to help you create an authentic life of freedom of your own choosing and on your own terms. So let's go ahead and get started with our next chapter of Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our professor for this series, Dana Scranton.
Well, thank you as usual there, Craig. It's just wonderful to be here. I hope everybody's got wonderful weather and wonderful times happening around them. Okay, well, we're just going to get right into it today. We are into the self-discipline, the second of the two means by which you can defeat drifting and defeat the devil's dangerous predilection to lead you into a life of hypnotic rhythm that is negative. So today we're going to be talking about the second of the topics, and it's self-discipline. And so let me just pull the slides up real quick here. Yep, you should have those up, right, Craig?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, so this is chapter 7 in the book, chapter 10 of the audio, if you're looking at that. So we're going to go over a few ideas and concepts, and then we'll move on into the audio. The thing about self-discipline is it is synergistic with the definiteness of purpose and a definite purpose. It's something that has to be present in order for the definite purpose to manifest. And what I mean by that is self-discipline is just a wish without a means, without a way. Let me reverse that. A definite purpose without self-discipline is a wish without a way. The self-discipline is what makes it happen. And so that's going to be the topic today, and I need to get rid of that. So self-discipline and all that it means. So here's a little bit of philosophy for you. The desire begets purpose. Purpose begets means. Means beget discipline. Discipline begets results, and results beget purpose. So it's a cyclical phenomenon. So you begin with a desire. Something within you says, I want this, and that this then becomes your purpose. And that purpose, of course, as we discussed in the past, can grow, it can change, it can multiply, because it all begins with a desire. And from that point, the horizons open up. Purpose requires a means. So when you have a purpose, you then seek the means to bring about that purpose. Now, those means bring about discipline, because means without discipline simply become whims, okay? So discipline brings momentum to the means of achieving that purpose. Now, with the discipline in place and the means identified, that gives you the results that ultimately end up delivering purpose. So this is kind of a cyclical thing, and it's not necessarily highlighted in this way in any of the lessons, but ultimately this is how you have to look at it. You have a desire, that desire manifests the purpose manifests the means to achieve the purpose. The discipline that you bring to it allows the means to effectively produce results. Those results then achieve your purpose. Now, in the book and in some of the literature that goes along with Napoleon Hill's instruction, self-discipline leads to self-mastery. And the two are, of course, related, but they are different. Self-discipline are the things that you do on a frequent basis daily, hourly, minute by minute, things that you have identified are essential to achieve that which you want in life. Doing that gives you mastery over self. So they are related, but they are different. Now, self-mastery, once you achieve it, creates and sustains a positive, constructive set of hypnotic rhythms. And notice the plural, hypnotic rhythms, as we've learned earlier, are basically habits that have become ingrained, autonomous, automatic. Self-mastery creates positive, constructive hypnotic rhythms. That's what we seek. So I always want to make sure that when we talk about hypnotic rhythms, we don't cast that in a negative light. It has both sides. It has the negative and the positive. So keep this in mind. Self-discipline is but one of the 7 ways to defeat the negative hypnotic rhythm and the drifting that we fear. There are 7 of these. We went through the first one. Now we're on number 2. They are all related. So as we move into all of these different methods to defeat those evil tactics of the devil, keep in mind they are all related. They are all connected. Now, self-discipline is deceptively important, and it's a foundational element that you have to adopt into your life. Now, here's a question, and Robert's going to know what this means. A foundational question that will serve you in many ways in developing self-discipline, and the independent thought required is, how do you know that? In order for self-discipline to root and become that person that is capable of doing all the things you want in your life, that mastered person, you have to seek the truth. Because self-discipline, working from lies, working from deception, does no one any good, especially you. So it must begin with truth. So there's a message that will continue in this chapter that we're going to listen to. And that's Mr. Earthbound and the devil have been sparring over the topic of churches and schools and the manner in which these entities influence and control the youth and humanity as a whole. And of course, this comes from a 1920s, 1930s paradigm, but it exists today. It's almost like a natural law. Now, in this chapter, the thing that I'd like to highlight, and it's important for just one reason, and that is we want to generalize what we're going to hear today. Okay, there are 3 objectives that the evil person can use to destroy humanity and control humanity. And it is control the media, control the schools, and control the churches. Now, Hill and the devil have gone back and forth on this. They've really pounded on it with a whole lot of passion and purpose. But really, it can be generalized. We want to generalize it for one very specific reason, because what we want is independent, objective thought. In other words, think for yourself, seek truth. In this way, you can preserve your independence in the face of manipulation that comes from these institutions of society that these 3 elements belong to. So, truth versus false self-discipline. True self-discipline is derived from independent thought, self-generated desire, and congruent actions, things that you develop on your own based on your own pursuit of your purpose and the truth that is embedded within your life. False discipline is programming and coercion masquerading as independent thought, fortified with implanted desire and directed action. In other words, those institutions of society that Mr. Earthbound and the devil have been sparring about, those are really, just generally speaking, institutions of society. And as we've talked about at the early part of this the mastermind, those exist all around us. They can be a single person, they can be organizations, there's many things they can be. Their agendas are not always filled with truth. As a matter of fact, the ones that are negative, destructive, usually they don't use truth as a weapon. they use deception. So that's kind of what they're hammering on when it comes down to the 21st century. So if we were to take this dialogue from the 20s and 30s and move it into the 21st century, it's more or less the same generalized to a much broader mechanism, much broader set of entities. So information contamination, what is that? Okay. The world is awash with this, and it really comes from a lot of different directions, a lot of different ideas, but technology, of course, has given people the ability to communicate massive amounts of information in such a way that trying to discern the truth is very difficult. And so it comes down to us to filter that, to learn it through independent thought, independent action, and self-autonomy. Okay. So how does one accurately and authentically identify and live their definite purpose? How does one create a plan of self-discipline that leads to that purpose? Accurate, authentic thinking. And that has been a theme throughout this whole mastermind, throughout the entire book. Okay, your desires and purpose must, in the end, serve not only you, but others as well, in order for them to be meaningful to anyone, including yourself. This requires accurate, independent thought. So you can't be swayed or influenced by the entities that surround us in this world that are seeking to control and dominate your thoughts. And of course, we go back to the influence of schools and churches that are debated by Mr. Earthbound and the devil, and recognize that same mechanism is all around us. So the final word there is self-discipline is truth in action. And that's kind of the root I want to leave you with as we move into this today, is you look at self-discipline as truth in action. Okay, let's crank.
Okay. Let you screen and share.
Didn't mean to fire hose you with a lot of ideas there, but
No. That was awesome. That was totally awesome.
Discipline.
The person.
Chapter 10. Self-discipline.
The person who is not master of himself can never be master of others. How true this is. Think of our political leaders who have fallen from grace because they could not control their own behavior. How can we trust them to control ours?
What preparation must one undergo before being able to move with definiteness of purpose at all times?
One must gain mastery over self. This is the second of the 7 principles. The person who is not master of himself can never be master of others. Lack of self-mastery is, of itself, the most destructive form of indefiniteness.
Where should one begin when making a start at control over self?
By mastering the 3 appetites responsible for most of one's lack of self-discipline. The 3 appetites are 1. The desire for food, 2. The desire for expression of sex, 3. The desire to express loosely organized opinions.
Does man have other appetites which need control?
Yes, many of them. But these 3 are the ones which should be conquered first. When a man becomes master of these 3 appetites, he has developed enough self-discipline to conquer easily those of lesser importance.
But these are natural appetites. They must be indulged if one is to be healthy and happy.
To be sure, they are natural appetites, but they are also dangerous, because people who have not mastered themselves overfeed the appetites. Self-mastery contemplates sufficient control over the appetites to enable one to feed them what they need and withhold food not needed.
Your viewpoint is both interesting and educational. Describe the details through which I may understand how and under what circumstances people overfeed the appetites.
Take the desire for physical food, for example. The majority of people are so weak in self-discipline they fill their stomachs with combinations of rich food which please the taste but overwork the organs of digestion and elimination. They pour into their stomachs both quantity and combinations of food which the body chemist can dispose of only by converting the food into deadly toxic poisons. These poisons clog and stagnate the body's sewer system until it slows down in its work of elimination of waste matter. After a while, the sewer system stops working altogether, and the victim has what he calls constipation. By that time, he is ready for the hospital. Auto-intoxication, or body sewer poisoning, takes the machinery of the brain and rolls it into something resembling a wad of putty. The victim then becomes sluggish in his physical movements and mentally irritable and fussy. If he could only take one good look at and one bad smell of his sewer system, he would be ashamed to look himself in the face. City sewers are not the pleasantest of places when they become overloaded or clogged, but they are clean and sweet compared with the intestinal sewer when it has been overloaded or clogged. This is not a pretty story to be associated with the pleasant and necessary act of eating, but that is where it belongs, because overeating and wrong food combinations are the evils which cause auto-intoxication. People who eat wisely and keep their body sewers clean handicap me, because a clean body sewer generally means a sound body and a brain that functions properly. Imagine, if your imagination can be stretched that far, how any human being could move with definiteness of purpose with his body sewer filled with enough poison to kill 100 people if it were injected into their bloodstream directly.
Here again, Napoleon Hill is far ahead of his time. Science eventually caught up with Hill and even surpassed his intuition about physical processes and how they link to mental and emotional health.
And all this trouble is the result of lack of control over the physical appetite for food.
Well, if you wish to be absolutely correct, you should say that improper eating is responsible for the majority of the ills of the body, and practically all headaches. If you want proof of this, select 100 people suffering with headaches and give each of them a thorough washing out of their body sewer systems with a high enema, and observe that no fewer than 95 of the headaches will disappear within a few minutes after the sewers have been cleaned.
From all you say about the intestinal tract, I gather the impression that mastery over the physical appetite for food means also mastery over the habit of neglecting to keep the intestines clean.
Yes, that is true. It is just as important to eliminate the waste matter of the body and the unused portions of food as it is to take the right amount and the correct combinations of food.
I never thought of auto-intoxication as being one of your devices of control over people, and I am utterly shocked to know how many people are victims of this subtle enemy. Let's hear what you have to say of the other two appetites.
Well, take the desire for sex expression. Now there is a force with which I master the weak and the strong, the old and the young, the ignorant and the wise. In fact, I master all who neglect to master sex.
How can one master the emotion of sex?
By the simple process of transmuting that emotion into some form of activity other than copulation. Sex is one of the greatest of all forces which motivate human beings. Because of this fact, it is also one of the most dangerous forces. If humans would control their sex desires and transmute them into a driving force with which to carry on their occupation, that is, if they spent on their work 1/2 the time they dissipate in pursuit of sex, they would never know poverty.
Do I understand you to imply there is a relationship between sex and poverty?
Yes, where sex is not under definite control. If allowed to run its natural course, sex will quickly lead one into the habit of drifting.
Is there any relationship between sex and leadership?
Yes. All great leaders in every walk of life are highly sexed, but they follow the habit of controlling their sex desires, switching them into a driving force behind their occupation.
Is the habit of overindulgence in sex as dangerous as the habit of taking narcotics or liquor?
There is no difference between these habits. Both lead to hypnotic control through the habit of drifting.
Why does the world look upon sex as something vulgar?
Because of the vulgar abuse people have made of this emotion. It is not sex that is vulgar. It is the individual who neglects or refuses to control and guide it.
Do you mean by your statement that one should not indulge the desire for sex?
No, I mean that sex, like all other forces available to man, should be understood, mastered, and made to serve man. The desire for sex expression is as natural as the desire for food. The desire can no more be killed than one can entirely stop a river from flowing. If the emotion of sex is shut off from the natural mode of expression, it will break out in some other less desirable form, just as a river will, if dammed, break through and flow around the dam. The person who has self-discipline understands the emotion of sex, respects it, and learns to control and transmute it into constructive activities.
Just what damage is there in overindulgence of sex?
The greatest damage is that it depletes the source of man's greatest driving force and wastes, without adequate compensation, man's creative energy. It dissipates energy needed by nature to maintain physical health. Sex is nature's most useful therapeutic force. It depletes the magnetic energy which is the source of an attractive, pleasing personality. It removes the sparkle from one's eyes and sets up discord in the tone of one's voice. It destroys enthusiasm, subdues ambition, and leads inevitably to the habit of drifting on all subjects.
I would like for you to answer my question in another way by telling me what beneficial ends the emotion of sex may be made to attain if mastered and transmuted.
Controlled sex supplies the magnetic force that attracts people to one another. It is the most important factor of a pleasing personality. It gives quality to the tone of voice and enables one to convey through the voice any feeling desired. It serves, as nothing else can serve, to give motive power to one's desires. It keeps the nervous system charged with the energy needed to carry on the work of maintaining the body. It sharpens the imagination and enables one to create useful ideas. It gives quickness and definiteness to one's physical and mental movements. It gives one persistence and perseverance in the pursuit of one's major purpose in life. It is a great antidote for all fear. It gives one immunity against discouragement. It helps to master laziness and procrastination. It gives one physical and mental endurance while undergoing any form of opposition or defeat. It gives one the fighting qualities necessary under all circumstances for self-defense. In brief, it makes winners and not quitters.
Are those all the advantages you claim for controlled sex energy?
No, they are only some of the more important benefits it provides. Perhaps some will believe the greatest of all the virtues of sex is that it is nature's method of perpetuation of all living things. This alone should remove all thought that sex is vulgar.
I gather from what you say that the emotion of sex is a virtue, not a fault.
It is a virtue when controlled and directed to the attainment of desirable ends. It is a fault when neglected and permitted to lead to acts of lust.
Why aren't these truths taught to children by their parents in the public schools?
The neglect is due to ignorance of the real nature of sex. It is just as necessary in maintaining health for one to understand and properly use the emotion of sex as it is to keep the body's sewer system clean. Both subjects should be taught in all public schools and all homes where there are children.
Wouldn't the majority of parents need instruction on the proper function and use of sex before they could intelligently teach their children?
Yes, and so would the public school teachers.
What relative position of importance would you give to the need for accurate knowledge on the subject of sex?
It is next to the top of the list. There is but one thing of greater importance to human beings. That is accurate thought.
Do I understand you to say that knowledge of the true functions of sex and ability to think accurately are the two things of greatest importance to mankind?
That is what I intend you to understand. Accurate thinking comes first because it is the solution to all man's problems, the answer to all his prayers, the source of opulence and all material possessions. Accurate thinking is aided by properly controlled and directed sex emotion, because sex emotion is the same energy as that with which one thinks. It begins with those who desire self-determination sufficiently to be willing to pay its price. No one can be entirely free, spiritually, mentally, physically, and economically, without learning the art of accurate thinking. No one can learn to think accurately without including, as a part of the needed knowledge, information on the control of sex emotion through transmutation.
It will be a great surprise to many people to learn there is so close a relationship between thinking and sex emotion. Tell us now about the third appetite, and let's see what it has to do with self-discipline.
The habit of expressing loosely organized opinions is one of the most destructive of habits. Its destructiveness consists in its tendency to influence people to guess instead of searching for the facts when they form opinions, create ideas, or organize plans. The habit develops a grasshopper mind, one that jumps from one thing to another but never completes anything. And, of course, carelessness in the expression of opinions leads to the habit of drifting. From there it is only a step or two until one is bound by the law of hypnotic rhythm, which automatically prohibits accurate thinking.
What other disadvantages are there in free expression of opinions?
The person who talks too much informs the world of his aims and plans, and gives to others the opportunity to profit by his ideas. Wise men keep their plans to themselves and refrain from expressing uninvited opinions. This prevents others from appropriating their ideas and makes it difficult for others to interfere with their plans.
Why do so many people indulge in the habit of expressing uninvited opinions?
The habit is one way of expressing egotism and vanity. The desire for self-expression is inborn in people. The motive back of the habit is to attract the attention of others and to impress them favorably. Actually, it has just the opposite effect. When the self-invited speaker attracts attention, it usually is unfavorable.
Yes. What other disadvantages has the habit?
The person who insists on talking seldom has an opportunity to learn by listening to others.
But isn't it true that a magnetic speaker often puts himself in the way of opportunity to benefit himself by attracting the attention of others through his powers of oratory?
Yes, a magnetic orator does have an asset of tremendous value in his ability to impress people by his speech. But he cannot make the best use of this asset if he forces his speech on others without their invitation. No single quality adds more to one's personality than the ability to speak with emotional feeling, force, and conviction. But the speaker must not impose his speech upon others without being invited to do so. There is an old saying that nothing is worth more than its actual cost. This applies as well to the free, uninvited expression of opinions as to material things.
What about people who volunteer their opinions by expressing them in writing? Do they also suffer by lack of self-discipline?
One of the worst pests on earth is the person who writes uninvited letters to people of prominence. Men in public office, moving picture stars, men who have succeeded in business or written a best-selling book. And people whose names appear often in the newspapers are continuously besieged by people who write letters expressing their opinion on all subjects.
But the writing of uninvited letters is a harmless way of finding pleasure through self-expression, is it not? What damage does one do by the habit?
Habits are contagious. Every habit attracts a flock of its relatives. The habit of doing anything that is useless leads to the formation of other habits that are useless, especially the habit of drifting.
Take a moment to remember that letter writing was about the only way to communicate in the written form when Napoleon Hill wrote this manuscript. As you listen, think about how his thoughts would apply to today's world of blogging and social networking.
But that is not all the dangers associated with the habit of indulging in uninvited expression of opinions. The habit creates enemies and places in their hands dangerous weapons by which they may do great injury to the one who indulges in it. Thieves and confidence men and racketeers pay big prices for the names and addresses of the writers of uninvited letters. Knowing as they do, the writers of these letters become easy victims of all manner of schemes that result in the loss of their money. They refer to the writers of such letters as nuts. If you wish to know how foolish people are who write uninvited letters, read the nut column of any newspaper, the column in which the paper publishes the voluntary opinions of its readers, and you will see for yourself how the writers of such letters antagonize people and invite opposition from others.
Now, I had no idea, Your Majesty, that people get into so much difficulty through uninvited expression of their opinions. But now that you have brought up the subject, I do remember writing the editor of a prominent magazine an uninvited letter of criticism, which cost me a fine position on his staff, at a fat salary.
That is a perfect example. The proper place to begin self-discipline is right where you stand. The way to begin is by recognizing the truth, that there is nothing for good or evil throughout the myriads of universes except the power of natural law. There is no individual personality anywhere throughout the myriad of universes with the slightest power to influence a human being, save nature and human beings themselves. There is no human being now living, no human being has ever lived, and no human being ever will live with the right or the power to deprive another human being of the inborn privilege of free and independent thought. That privilege is the only one over which any human being can have absolute control. No adult human being ever loses the right to freedom of thought, but most humans lose the benefits of this privilege either by neglect or because it has been taken away from them by their parents or religious instructors before the age of understanding. These are self-evident truths, no less important because they are being called to your attention by the devil than they would be if brought to your attention by my opposition.
Hill distinguishes our right to have independent thoughts from our uninvited expression of those thoughts. How would you apply this principle in today's world of blogging and social media?
But what are people going to lean upon in the hour of emergency when they know not where nor to whom to appeal?
Let them lean upon the only dependable power available to any human being.
And what is that?
Themselves. The power of their own thoughts. The only power they can control and may rely upon. The only power which cannot be perverted, colored, modified, or falsified by their dishonest fellow human beings.
The only dependable power available to any human being, the power of their own thoughts. The only power they can control and may rely upon. You may not be able to control other people, but you can control how you react to them and their actions. This is an easy thing to say, but much more difficult to do. We tend to want to change other people when we can truly only change ourselves and how we react to others.
All you say seems logical, but why must I come to the devil to discover such profound truths? Let's get back to the 7 principles. You've already disclosed enough information to show clearly that the secret of how to break the power of hypnotic rhythm is wrapped in the 7 principles. You have shown, too, that the most important of these principles is self-discipline. Now, go ahead and describe the other 5 principles you have not yet mentioned and indicate what part they play in giving one self-discipline.
First, let me summarize that part of my confession we have already covered. I have frankly told you that my 2 most effective devices for mastering human beings are the habit of drifting and the law of hypnotic rhythm. I have shown you that drifting is not a natural law, but a man-made habit which leads to man's submission to the law of hypnotic rhythm. The 7 principles are the media by which man may break the hold of hypnotic rhythm and take possession again of his own mind. You see, therefore, the 7 principles are the 7 steps which lead victims of hypnotic rhythm out of the self-made prisons in which they are bound.
The 7 principles are the master key that unlocks the door to spiritual, mental, and economic self-determination. Is that true?
Yes, that's another way of stating the truth.
Okay, well, that was basically half of the chapter in the book.
Wow.
And going into the next chapter in the audio, from what I see here, he's going to go directly into the 3rd of the principles, which is learning from adversity. So that second part of the chapter, which was a continued rant on the schools and religion, basically, as I open with, which is the institutions of society, that is left off the audio. So if you want to go read that, to a certain extent, it's a regurgitation of what's been covered earlier, but it does so in a different way, basically imploring that you have to have your independent thought in order to defend yourself against the institutions. So anyway, going back to the topic here that they discussed, the one line in there that I find extremely important, probably the most overlooked, is there is no force of nature that can deprive the individual from the right and the privilege of having their own independent thought. And that goes down to what I said earlier, truth, and asking that fundamental question, how do you know that?
Right.
Because everything that we seek to do in developing the discipline to activate the means to pursue and attain the purpose really comes down to being true to ourselves and true to the purpose that we want to achieve. And keeping other people's thoughts and intentions out of our minds. In fact, there's a guy named Gary Cox, you may know him, he's a personal development and business guru. His mission is to keep people from renting real estate in his mind. And that's what we're dealing with here with all of the forces of nature that come after us and the forces of society. Our mission is to define our own thoughts and to inoculate us from all the noise, and self-discipline is one of the issues or one of the tools to do that with. So having said that, let's open it up, Craig.
Very good. What a great chapter to listen to and understand. So, if you'd like to participate and share what your thoughts are on this chapter, Self Discipline, Chapter 10 in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, go ahead and put your cursor in the middle of the screen where you see these faces. On the bottom is one of the buttons there is Raise Hand. Click on that button and we'll call on you in the order in which we receive your request, or type something in the chat and we will also ask that on your or share that on your behalf. So that we have all of these mechanisms here to get you involved, because the whole idea behind this series of Outwitting the Devil is for us to discuss, to mastermind, to share what we think about this incredible book, really, and especially given the times, society today, how perfect it fits in what is happening. I mean, and this was 1932 it was written, or Dana?
Well, the manuscript was finished in the late 1920s, 1929, I think, is when the manuscript was actually finished, and it just got buried.
Wow.
Oh, incredible. And it's only come out recently, too, and shared with the world in public. So what an incredible book. Coach Bob Johnson, I see that your hand is up. Go ahead, unmute yourself, and please share with us.
Hi, Dana. A great chapter. I was going to ask you, this is kind of not related to the chapter, though, but I noticed Napoleon Hill, a lot of his books overlap with some of the thoughts in them. I know he had a mastermind with, I think, Edison and all these other. I can remember that in a past book I read with him. My question to you is, do you think this is the best book to read of his? If you had to choose one book to read, would this be it?
That's a good question. You know, if I walked up to the layman who was interested in personal development and business success and personal success, and I had these two books in my hands, I think I would probably hand him Think and Grow Rich first. And the reason I say that is because to dive into this book without guidance, I mean, it's an illuminating book, no doubt about it. But the person would need to have a little bit of background. And even though it's provided in the front of the book, the Think and Grow Rich gives them the background, if you will, some of the historical perspectives and what it is that he was trying to achieve. Then this book comes along and says, okay, now that you've studied the prerequisite, now you're going to the graduate course. And the reason I say that is because I have introduced this book to a couple of friends, and to a person, they never finished the book because it offended them at one point, and they just shut down. And the reason for that is the purpose for reading the book. They didn't have the appropriate purpose. Think and Grow Rich basically says, if you want to be prosperous, if you want to be rich, if you want to succeed, here's a formula, the 17 principles, all, kind of consolidated into that book. If they can get through that and they have the enthusiasm to pursue further knowledge, this book is, this is the answer.
Okay,
that's my
gotcha.
personal experience.
Yeah, I think
agree.
I agree. I agree with you there. I know there was one book he had a mastermind of several different people, Edison and all those other people. And I don't know if that's in Think and Grow Rich or if it was in another book I read of his. But once
that shows up in Think and Grow Rich, because in Think and Grow Rich, one of the concepts that he brings forth is the mastermind. He invented it.
Right.
And so he describes that. Now, that mastermind was with the fictitious or spiritual or ethereal people, right? He got this huge mastermind that had Edison in it and Abraham Lincoln. And he had lots of advisors. And some people, and that was one of the things that these particular people couldn't wrap their heads around. But
right.
Yeah.
because it's it just calls whatever that entity is that allows you to have ultimate wisdom, or infinity wisdom, is the sixth sense.
Yeah.
So it dives into the metaphysical very, very quickly. So people that are, pretty strong believers religiously immediately believe the book is
Yeah,
uh, yeah,
that's exactly what happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
But I would say that if you're going to introduce somebody to the book, you kind of want to qualify it first and say, look, this book is filled with timeless truths. It is ever so relevant today, but you have to be able to think broadly and think open-mindedly, and that's the key, because even though the language and the stories and some of the examples are dated, they are nevertheless relevant to the present time. And so, you got to tell them it's not that you take it with a grain of salt, you take it with an open mind and then see what they do with it. But yeah, that would be my preferred path. But it also comes down to knowing the individual. If you know who the person is and you can kind of gauge if they've got that kind of personality to be open to being challenged in many ways, then I'd give them this book first. But yeah.
Because I think this brings up a lot of good points too that aren't in his other books. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
They aren't emphasized as strongly. They're kind of buried in there, but this book just puts it right out on the table. It takes the wrappers off and says, there it is.
Right.
I mean, I don't recall that the other books go into the sewer discussion to such depth. And,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, but thanks. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Coach Bob, thank you so very, very much. Robert, did you want to share some of your thoughts as well?
Well, yeah, I was going to see if anybody else wanted to ask any questions or wanted to say anything. I hope by listening to that chapter, some of you are wondering if you're having too little or too much sex. It's like you got to figure that out. Okay.
Well, you kind of wonder because if you go back just a few years when the Viagra commercials were on about every 5 minutes, you had to question what it was that people were trying to market,
Right.
and why it was of such interest. And the way that he puts it is it's an energy management problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, one of the things that in Think and Grow Rich, I still my favorite book is The Science of Getting Rich because I just think it's so a simpler read. It's not as in depth, but in Think and Grow Rich, one of the things that it was, I think it was called anyway, sexual manifestation or something. But it always talked about that people older in life, got more done in life, when it came to definition of purpose, only because they took some of their sexual drive and they focused on whatever their definite purpose was. And so it was just a shifting of that. And again, I know, for if I one of the things that really grabbed me about this chapter too is I think about in the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s, um, um, me being able to see other people or hear other people's opinions was zero. When I look at how successful I was, not only as a mechanic, but how successful I was at the beginning of my, network marketing deal that turned into personal development, speaking, everything. I had one opinion. I had both in mechanics and also I had two mentors, and that was the only opinion that I was listening to. So, he was really good at not, I didn't like watch all the televisions. I didn't have YouTube channels. I didn't have, social media that, it went from very few people giving you an opinion to everybody being able to give you an opinion. It's freaking maddening that it's gone that much. Not to throw politics in this, but I heard that Meta got charged. They said the jury was out less than a few hours or whatever, and Meta ended up like 370 million or something like that. So the jury came back with a concept of saying that they really truly believed that Meta designed things and didn't watch them well enough let's use it for us or this discussion, to be very good at helping children drift in the wrong directions. Allowing them to not only probably see a lot of stuff that they shouldn't see, but also not being good in allowing people to be able to, you know, what would be, connect with them and actually steer them in the wrong direction. And you think about that only today, when people are sad when they go, well, good for Meta. They got sued 370 million. Right now, according to their revenue stats, I don't remember what it was. It was like 34 billion or something. So I divided that by 365. So, so Meta right now is net profiting $170 million a day. So to think that this jury finally finds them guilty, now they got one in LA, and they were found guilty of manipulating people in the wrong way, and that's 2 days of profit. It doesn't seem actually just to me. It's like something like that should really, really, really hurt. But the other thing that I got out of this chapter too is the whole concept of the grasshopper. I forgot that saying, try to grab the grasshopper from my hand. That popped in my head. But watching people that I truly am doing everything in my power to guide, and watching them just grasshopper from idea to idea to idea to idea, thought, is very, very difficult. And one of the things, Dana, that I know that you may or may not know, but I do a daily wisdom before this, at 1 o'clock our time. And I find it very, very uncanny that the subjects that I talked about without really looking to see what the next chapter was exactly what we were talking about. That just always has worked for me. So today we did a short talk on how much of an impact Chuck Norris had on people. And one of the things that everyone said is that, he was smaller than everyone. He didn't have a lot of talent. But they said he just over disciplined everyone. It's that, his study of the arts and multiple arts and becoming multiple black belts and all these different arts, and his constant watch and figuring out where the weak person was. So it was pretty interesting that, there was people that beat him when he first came back to the United States, that beat him, but he studied them and came back and beat them. It's just like, so, it was, but it was all about his uncanny, which Bruce Lee was known as that too, is their unbelievable discipline. Their discipline of, you do it, you do it, you do it, you just get gooder and gooder, and you never stop doing it. You just get gooder at it. And yeah, I think a lot of people that mentally are dealing with how do you know that is, again, just the amount of opinions out there. To me, I've never seen, and what I believe more than anything in this day and time is how gullible everyone is. It's just that we are so, like the news, for instance, no one even thought that there would be 24-hour news channels that did nothing but just offer people's opinions. It's like no one ever thought that, this person that's giving me this opinion, this so-called expert, that if they were brought up in a court of law and a good prosecutor went against them, you wouldn't listen to a damn thing they would have to say. So the defense brings up the person, says they're an expert in something, and then they say, okay, great, you swore on the stage, I'll tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And then the prosecutor steps up and says, isn't it true? And then gives you a bunch of facts. And when the prosecutor gets done, it's usually, I'm not going to listen to anything this frickin' person has to say.
Yep.
But these are all the people on all the news channels. So then we got, these, 2 billion life coaches that are online. You know what I mean? And I'm just like going, wow, what a crazy place and to learn the importance and definition of purpose and also focus and just bottom line, just all day, every day, be disciplined and on working on the thing that's most important to you and your family.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose the other question, Robert, is not only how do you know that, but so what?
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues I think people run into getting bombarded is they can go look for truth and they can distract themselves. Because if I've got an internet connection, a camera, a microphone, uh, I'm an influencer
Yeah.
and somebody's going to listen to me. Well, we need to ask, okay, how do you know that? Is it true? And the ultimate question, so what? Does it serve me and the audience or the population I seek to help? And
Yeah.
that might be the filter. Okay, I don't know if it's true. I'm not going to waste my time with it because it's irrelevant because I have a purpose and that purpose is backed by these means I need to achieve. And to do that, I need to be disciplined in these areas. I don't give a rip, about somebody's opinion about anything if it has no relevance to what I'm trying to achieve. And unfortunately, that's not what happens today. People you call it doom scrolling. Well,
Yeah.
that's what it is. I call it dumb scrolling because it makes you dumb.
Well, it is. It just you just made me think of an incredible story that's really really short that just downloaded to me, but it's a story about that there was these two lumberjacks that were competing, and this guy has won every year, and so this guy shows up to go against him, and so when they get going, it's like it looks like the person that's never ever done it before just really is cutting through trees faster than the champion, right? And then when it looks like he's close to getting finished, he just stops and disappears. And people are going, well, now the other guy's going to catch up to him. And so the champion almost catches up to him. And then he comes back an hour later and wins the championship. And everybody's going, you could have beat him so much easier if you didn't take the break. What did you do for an hour when you took the break? And he said, sharpening my axe. It was sharp when I started. I could tell when it was getting dull, and I took some time to sharpen the axe. And people were like, that's just a simple concept. But it's one of the things that I've done with a lot of things with people with unlimited wisdom. But the consistency, and I'd like your feedback on this, the consistency of being able to trust your own thoughts. I
Mhm.
believe that people are consistently seeking for opinions of others because I tell everyone, especially what I felt this year and maybe a year and a half more than anything, is my ability to stop using my overthinking to overthink everything and just to calm myself, be still and know that I am God, be still and have peace, and then simply ask the thing that I'm looking for. It is just really calmly, without overthinking, get connected with trusting my ability to answer the question for myself to take the next baby step.
Mhm.
And what I feel a lot of people have difficulty with is they overthink. So now they're not asking a higher power, the sixth sense, what I call God. So they never calm down enough to get that stillness to ask the right question. And then what they do is they overthink, overthink, overthink. And then their first thought is, I wonder what, Sandy's thinking. I wonder what Mary's thinking. I wonder what Melody's thinking. And it's like we immediately want to go ask other people what they think and what they would do in our situation. And it's like it's just bizarre to me, even though I catch myself doing it. I catch myself immediately sometimes thinking, what should I do? I then goes into an overthinking. And I've even done this in the last year and a half that I go back and I go, well, what did my mentors say about that? Like I haven't like I haven't documented myself and knowing what the hell I'm doing. Going back to mentors that I had, they don't do anything. They don't do anything like I do today because I believe in myself. But still, I'll find myself go, maybe I should watch an old video. Maybe I should or maybe I should find a new mentor. It's like I know that a lot of people do this. I won't call out any names, but immediately what they do is instead of trusting their self and asking themselves and being still, they immediately go out and see what the competition is doing.
Mhm.
This cracks me up because you have no idea how much the competition is doing. So the competition says we're the fastest growing, the biggest company. No one's got a better product than us, and we're breaking rank advances faster than any other company. And the response from people that hear that, oh, okay. It's
Yeah.
not. It's like, why not ask the documentation question first? Why not seek out the person that created the site or doing the marketing or whatever they're doing and immediately say, can I just see some deposits? Can I see some withdrawals and deposits? Well, they'll never tell me. Then why would you listen to them? But we already put ourselves in a position that I don't know. I don't trust myself. So now let me go listen to somebody else's opinion or BS, whatever you want to call it. So, how would you address the people, or is that coming up on how you should not only ask, how do you know that, but just simply say, why can't I trust myself?
Well, actually, it's not coming up because it's already come up. When we go back through the series up to this point, when he's talking about people not having their own thoughts, way back, and this is where he blames the schools and he blames the churches. That's where it begins. The young mind, and he goes over that, is being infiltrated by people who express their opinions and their thoughts that are not true. So it begins.
So we're already programmed through all the things that they mentioned. We're always programmed to not trust ourselves and listen to someone that's an expert, a teacher,
Yeah. Well, we're already
a
predisposed to that.
priest, a politician.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we're already predisposed, but then the other element is the use of fear. Fear is, I mean, it's very pervasive. Right now on the internet, if you look, you go on YouTube, anywhere you want to go, find your favorite expert. Some of them really know what they're doing, like you know what you're doing. But there are people who are so afraid of not looking like they know what they're doing that they then go and leverage somebody else's opinion as a safety net, even if that opinion is wrong. They
I
don't,
agree.
yeah, they don't have the discipline, they don't have the ethics and the morals to sit down and look at themselves and say, okay, I need to understand, is this true or not? I need to know what I'm talking about. Is it relevant to what I want to do? Do I have a purpose? And, we go back to this. I think one of the reasons that people do what you're describing, first of all, they don't really have a definite purpose. What
I
they're trying
agree.
to do is mitigate an ego of fear. And man, today with AI coming on, I'm a proponent of AI if it's used properly, but I have seen so many examples so far of people who are trusting AI to tell their story, and it's all full of crap. They're putting their persona out there, and it's not even them. So how can they trust themselves when they're allowing a digital entity to communicate to the world a person that they are not?
Wow.
You know, so I think it all really comes down to people are insecure because they have not mastered the ability to find out what is true and why it's important to them and a purpose. And if we go through this book, having a definite purpose is, I mean, that's the key. People
Right.
drive through life without that purpose, and without a purpose, they're gullible. Anything looks good.
If you won't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah, and that's what's happening in such a wild way. Well, look at your example of Meta. You know, that was all about exposing children to social media concepts and ideas at an age where they were unable to ascertain the truth.
Right.
They were unable to ascertain the facts. It was just, okay, this is fun. This looks like what everybody else is doing. I'm just going to be one of the other people. And it doesn't matter whether it's right, true, moral, or ethical.
Right.
So yeah, I think when you run into people like that, it's that just grab anything and go with it, like the media. Journalists, for example, I don't think they educate journalists anymore to be the Walter Cronkites of the world, the people who looked for truth and brought truth forward no matter what. Now it's just a
Right.
matter of what opinion can I use to get ratings. It
I used
doesn't
to
have to be
remember,
true.
even though I wasn't a news person, but I can remember people getting fired because they actually shared something on the news that they didn't double or triple source.
Yeah, yeah, I remember some of those too.
And it was like you never heard of the story after that. You just heard that the person didn't have the right sources and they brought a story to the public, the Americans, that wasn't true. And it's like you're fired and you're shamed for life.
And that's
And
because,
and and how in the hell did we get to, people now in front of a that are called journalists or called politicians or whatever, and they can stand in front of a group of people that'll listen to them and say anything they want. It's
well,
just,
we
it's
don't value truth anymore. We don't value truth, ethics, and morals. So, in the context of this book, what the devil and Mr. Earthbound have said time and time again is independent thought,
independent thought.
and seeking truth, and if you have that definite purpose, the relevance of your thought is aimed at achieving that purpose. And so you tend to have a stake in understanding what is right, true, and workable. And
Yeah,
so, you sit down and you look at some guy on a Facebook spewing a whole bunch of crap, you just click.
yeah.
So,
No,
yeah, that's a complex.
it really truly is asking yourself these questions all the time. Is
Yeah,
asking yourself, is what I'm currently doing getting me closer to that purpose?
yeah, yeah.
So, as little as that Zig Ziglar, the older I get, Dana, the simpler things get in my life, and so we know that it's the golden rule. We also know that Zig Ziglar says it. But, the definition of purpose for me is right now is if I help other people find their definition of purpose, then everything will be opened up for me. So if I'm consistently getting people to fall in love with themselves, trust themselves, and start leaning on, wow, is this an original thought of mine? Is this something that I'm really figuring out? Because the biggest inventors on the planet didn't do it before. They had no one to follow. There's a book that I haven't brought up in a long time, but it's the greatest miracle in the world. But Agmadino also wrote the no, it was the funny, the title escaped me, but it's the instead of the greatest miracle in the world, it has to do
Greatest
with
secret?
greatness. No, it has to do with greatness. It's like instead of science being rich, it probably is the science of being great. It's probably that simplistic because that's how
I think that's the
Augmentina.
Bible.
Yeah, that's so, thank you. But in that book, when, he talks about being great, it's the concept of Abraham Lincoln. It's like, okay, so who did Abraham Lincoln get to go to when he decided that he was going to make slavery not a deal anymore? See, there's these people that you look at that created the light bulb or created, any kind of invention, and they didn't have someone else to look back at
Mhm.
to say, this is how you do this thing. This is how you get rid of slavery. So the way to greatness is again the service of many. So when you think about the greatest people that have ever lived, they're usually connected to something that really made a huge difference in a lot of people's lives.
Yep.
So I'll leave you with that, Dana. Again, wow, I get so much out of this, so I thank you so much for doing it.
My pleasure. Thank you one and all for being here today.
Anything, love? Just leave you alone?
Please, for the love of God, leave me alone.
Wow. What a great session, Dana. Thank you so very much. Shout outs to Coach Bob Johnson. Of course, Robert and Terry, thank you so much for the inputs. Matt Hollis for being our executive producer and our professor, Dana Scranton. Thank you so much for being our guide on this journey of Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. So much appreciated, very, very much. And just a reminder that if you'd like to save some of the items that in the chat, some of the things that were brought up during this this chapter today, go ahead and click the three dots in the meeting chat and then click on Save Chat. It will download to your computer as we conclude today. Don't forget, next week at the same time, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, we will be back here with our next chapter of Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill and featuring our very special professor for this amazing series, Dana Scranton. On behalf of Unlimited Wisdom, thank you all so very much. I'm going to go ahead and unmute in just a moment, but please be good to yourselves. Be cash, bye-bye, and let's go ahead, unmute, and say so long. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks so
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
everybody.
Scott, Matthew, Faith.
Yeah,
Hi,
we'll talk
Sarah.
next week.
Nice to see you.
Bless
Love you
you.
all, guys.
Yeah, soon.
Bless you, bless you, bless you. Thank you, Eric. Mr. Shoemaker.
Thank you.
Michael, Angela, Melody, Coach
Have
Bob.
a great day. Love you guys.
Thank you,
Have a
Craig.
great day. Great session.